Barbara Parker, and welcome to 2020 Bolingbrook. Today we have a great show in store for you. We're going to learn a little bit about anxiety, homeschooling, and sports. Sit back. Hello, Bolingbrook, and thanks for tuning in again. With me today is Laureen Hillebrand, and she is a homeschooler. So she's going to talk about the pros and cons of homeschooling, plus offer some tidbits for our e-learning for this first quarter here in Bolingbrook. Laureen, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate you taking the time for us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Our family moved to Romeoville about 15, 16 years ago. We lived there we moved 16 years ago. We lived there for 15 years, and then we just recently moved up to Winfield. But we have been blessed with, my husband and I have been blessed with 6 children. And when our oldest was 6, we began homeschooling. And so it has just been a very long journey and delightful, some surprises, some challenges, but this has been a great place. The Romeoville, Bolingbrook area has been a wonderful place to raise a family. Really enjoyed it.
That's good. Now, when you decided to homeschool, did you do a lot of research before you made that decision?
I wouldn't say a tremendous amount. We had already had contact with quite a number of homeschool families in several different church communities, as well as through some Bible studies. And although I was kind of watching from the outside, it took a little bit of time to picture our family as a homeschooling family. But once we stepped out, just saying, well, let's try this for a year. Let's see what happened. At that point, our oldest was in first grade, partway into first grade. We said, well, let's just try it for this year. And then that year went well. Well, let's try one more year. And it was just a progressive thing for 20 years.
All right, now with 6 children, you had them in different grades at different times. How challenging was that for you at home?
It actually, I would say, worked well in the sense that the kids could often work together. Things like mathematics and language are really, it's largely progressive, and kids will move at their own pace. This one student 2 years ahead of another will have different math. But subjects such as history, science, art, some of the creative writing, those things are not specific, grade-specific information. And so we could have the kids work together. You know, the oldest 2 or 3 might do history together as some of the younger ones were working on math on their own. And then the younger ones, we might be doing science together. And so they provided some interaction, a little bit of challenge. We had a lot of, not just reading things and discussing, but little quizzes that they could compete against one another. And so I felt it really was a good dynamic to have. It's a little bit more work, but it's a good dynamic, even with a big family.
Oh, that was good. Now, were you a stay-at-home mom during this time?
Yes. I had worked part-time. I was a physical therapist and moved from a full-time to part-time status when my oldest was born, and through when the second was born. And at the point where our third child was born, we were moving out of state, and we had family daycare for the part-time that I worked, which had been wonderful. But at that point, I stopped working and just was full-time with the children, which was also, it's not necessary for homeschooling, but it certainly does make it a little bit easier, and that was a blessing for us.
Now, what would you say was 1 or 2 of the challenges that you had to overcome with homeschooling?
I would say one of the challenges is that there are certain things that are just really hard to do in a homeschool environment. One of the things that had always been important to my husband and I is we wanted our kids to be comfortable with speaking in front of a group and making a presentation and just sharing ideas confidently in a group setting. And so when you're just with your family and you know everybody, it's a whole lot different than speaking in front of a group of strangers or in front of someone who might be critical of your ideas. And so we did have to make an effort to be involved with, we had some informal clubs, some gavel clubs that were public speaking, some trying to meet together with other families and encourage our children to give presentations for the group. 4-H provided a great opportunity. They have a public speaking opportunity where you're before a judge, and so for many years they would do that multiple times per year. And so there are a lot of resources in the homeschool community and in the larger community, but you have to make a little bit more of an effort to access those resources.
Now, when you talk about services in the community, what I just learned recently is in Bolingbrook, they have a Facebook page, Bolingbrook Homeschool Moms. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and you know, you can share ideas and thoughts with everybody, and you get strength from other people then. You know, like if you feel frustrated with the child at home, I'll give you an example. I have 4 fabulous grandchildren, okay? They're the apples of my eye. My oldest is very smart when it comes to math and everything. Michael's off the chart smart. My oldest granddaughter wasn't. So when she got to algebra, my daughter was going to hire my grandson to help her, to do tutoring. He said, no, if I'm hiring you and I'm going to pay you, you are not her older brother. It's a client and teacher relationship then. Okay, well, Michael's the kind of child that you tell him once and he gets it. So he would tell Deanna, and she would look at him like, okay, what do I do? And he would say, Deanna, I told you. And he would say it again. He had no clue how to say it maybe in a different way or to get her to go that. He got fired after a couple of days, yes, because he just didn't have what she needed then. You know, like when you go to school for teaching, you learn a lot of different things. Michael just, everything with schoolwork came easy to him. And she didn't. He's a kid in college, one of his electives was advanced calculus, okay, because math was easy for him. So I said, Michael, most people take basket weaving, and he goes, Grandma, that's like basket weaving for me. He said, I know, I'll get an A. You know, so for being homeschooling, I think and it could just be a subject that it might not be the same, or each child is different, so you could have had great experiences with your first 2, and then the third one, all of a sudden now, okay, I got to figure out how to do this a little differently because they're not picking up the same way as the other 2. So having support group, I think, would be tremendous help.
It certainly is. And I think that's one of the things that really shines out as a critical thing is in homeschooling, you really don't want to try to do it alone. There are specific homeschool support groups as well as other community resources that are available. But having other people that you can bounce ideas off of makes a huge difference. I had actually a couple of friends along the way as our kids were growing up, and several of them just said, well, we're going to homeschool, and they did so for a year, but they really didn't tap into community resources. And after a year, they just, this isn't working very well. And so they ended up going back to other things that they had been involved with before, and sometimes their kids really struggled or really started moving into adulthood to make bad choices. And I had one say, I'm sorry, you know, we didn't stay on that course of homeschooling, but you cannot do it alone. You really want to tap into other families that you can share ideas and brainstorm, and if your kids share some interests, you can get together for an informal, you know, some sports or some art projects or just some play time to let the kids hang out and play together. But you can be touching into other ideas that the parents have to, oh, how do I get past this hurdle, this issue that I'm having?
Now, what would you say is one of your pluses from homeschooling?
I would say that probably one of the very greatest things is the opportunity to really capitalize on each child's strengths, to allow them to follow their passions where they go, because your day isn't delineated that you have these 6 subjects that you must cover every day and these assignments, and there isn't time left for that. I've had several kids that actually early on were not necessarily passionate about math, but we had the opportunity to be involved with and are still involved with a homeschool math team up in Wheaton, a Cornerstone math team. And as they got into that and they loved the competitive nature of, you know, competing against the other kids on the team, then the whole team competing against other large schools, small schools, schools across the state, they became very passionate about math. And they were able to get through all their high school math by about sophomore year, start in on college math, and several of them, they ended up pursuing engineering-related careers down through University of Illinois, but they were able to get through the math before they even got to University of Illinois. By the time they got down there, they'd already been through calculus, multiple semesters, and you know, were able to take no or maybe one math class down there. That was a huge advantage for them. Others weren't so passionate about, you know, a math-related area. One daughter has been passionate about writing and used to write long, involved, creative writing stories, and now she's in her early 20s and she's publishing things on Amazon. That fire just has stayed lit, and she, to this day, is still writing new stories.
Wow, that's very cool.
So,
Congratulations to her. That's really good. Now, with parents today, with COVID going on, and now they are all going to be e-learning, is there a tip or something that you could give to them, a word of wisdom that might help them through this? And we know it's at least the first quarter, hopefully not, but you never know.
Yeah, I certainly would encourage, anyone who's either thinking of this in the very short term, that they're supporting their kids for a short time of e-learning until they can go back into a traditional school, or maybe they're thinking, well, we'll try this homeschooling, and maybe it'll last longer. I would encourage you, yes, you can do it. A lot of times, parents who are outside the homeschool community say, well, I could never teach my children on my own. And I feel as if you don't enter with all the resources, but you enter one day at a time saying, I'm going to try this. I think I can do it. And with the support of friends, if you are a believer, with just praying that God will direct you to the resources that you need, you just take it one day at a time. And as you do it, you learn more patience, you learn to know your child better, you learn the things that really make them tick and the things that really help them to be self-disciplined and do the work that they need. And so there's a growing experience that it is like no other. I think there's a Robert Frost poem that talks about two paths diverge in a golden wood. And I chose the one less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. And I certainly feel as if for our family and for thousands of others across the state and across the nation, that homeschooling is the path less traveled by. But it has been such a beautiful road, and it has made a real difference as we see these kids coming into young adulthood, making good choices, finding good spouses, and now raising a new generation that can also follow in the same path. It has just been a beautiful and wonderful experience. So you can do it. Take the first step, go day by day, and see where that leads.
One of the things that I did read about when they talked about with the kids now is to make sure that they have their own space. And it's set up, like it could even be at their kitchen table, but when it's time to learn, they have space that's just theirs.
Yes.
And to help them kind of have a little structured settlement to their day.
I would say every kid is different. I know many families that do that. They have a school room, and so students have, their kids have a space there, and their books are there, and entering that room means it's time to focus and work on studies. We were a little more informal. The kids often worked at the dining room table, or as we were doing science or history, we were on the couches in the living room reading together, discussing, doing projects. Sometimes they would take some projects up in their room. And so we didn't have as much structure, but in many cases that structure works well. It's a matter of figuring out what works well for your own students. Another thing that I would encourage is if your student is going to have or need internet access, just be aware, be monitoring that. Let your student know that you're going to be able to track sites and watch what they're doing, because the internet can be a real time sink. A student can be sitting in front of their computer saying they're working on a writing lesson, but there's a lot of checking on
playing
Facebook
a game.
or emailing. Exactly. And so if your student knows that your child knows that you're going to be checking that, and there are different electronic things that you can use that'll just give a history of where a child has been, those are great opportunities. You can also, just restrict, okay, there'll be 2 hours of internet access, and then you can have the controls turn it off, so that when they're doing school subjects, when they're to be learning, they're really learning. And at the end of the day, outside of that, if they need to be in touch with their friends or want to go on and just kind of surf, it's not cutting into their school time.
Since you've had 6 children going through homeschool, did you ever have an instance where when you had the lessons with the older group or whatever, and then you're with the younger ones learning, and then the older one was having a problem, do they come barging in and ask to interrupt you and ask a question?
No, for the most part, that didn't happen. There were times when I definitely had to maybe sit down with them late afternoon, and we would need to discuss things. But one of the nice things, especially as kids get older, into the maybe 5th, 6th grade and on through junior high and high school, is there's a certain amount of they learn to teach themselves. And so they may not be able to get all the answers, but they know how to peruse what's there in the book. They know how to, perhaps go online and Google some terms they don't know, or look for some other resources that can help them understand. And although they may not find all the answers that way, but a lot of times they can problem solve till they get close to the answer. And then if they need to still consult me, or, for some of the math things or computer things, talk with my husband. They can do that, but it's not an immediate, I can't go one step further until I have this question answered. No, they can fill their time and get the answers they need largely
I could tell you
on their
today,
own.
I could not do math with kids. Even with my daughter, they changed it from how I learned math, and it's like, okay, it's like a foreign language to me now.
The tremendous thing is there are so many resources out there. If you peruse, I know there's a homeschool convention that meets at Calvary Church this year it was all online, but if you go into the resources just within the homeschool world, there are so many opportunities for, math has Matthew C. and teaching textbooks and Saxon math and lots of opportunities. And by talking with other parents, you can see which one seems like a very kid-friendly for this kind of learner or for that kind of learner, or a video presentation where they're going to get a video they can back up and listen to something again. There are so many opportunities. You don't ever do homeschooling off the top of your head. You're using resources and just walking with your child and letting them kind of take the reins and go on with the resources that are there.
Now, with homeschooling, do you get some type of curriculum from the state that you have to study for each grade, so many things to move on?
Every state is different, but Illinois gives a lot of freedom to homeschoolers. There are certain, to my understanding, requirements, and I don't know if it's from the district or from the state, but that they need to have, this many, 4 credits of English language, and I'm not sure 2 credits of math. I'm not sure what those requirements are, because we kind of said, you're doing 4 years of math and you're doing, at least 3 years of science. But there are certain state requirements that students must meet. But for the most part, what you do with those requirements, what curricula you use, what you do for extra, above and beyond, is left to the parent and student's discretion so that they get a good education.
Now, when you go to, say, high school and the child is involved with sports or something like that, when you homeschool, how do you make up for that part of it?
There are many good options to pursue. We did several, actually, and Bolingbrook is particularly good in this area. The Valley View School District, which is what Romeoville as well as Bolingbrook had, allows at least when we were in that stage of our lives, they allowed homeschool students to participate with the same requirements as the public school students. So they had to pay the same fees if grades had to be submitted to be on the track team. We had several kids that did track through the Romeoville schools. So they would have to have the same requirements for submitting grades if it was once a week to make sure that they were at, I'm not sure, a B minimum, C minimum, whatever it was, average. But there were no extra requirements imposed on homeschool students.
Oh, so they could participate then?
They could,
wow.
They could. And I believe that there were other students in our larger homeschool community that did drama through the schools or that sort of thing. We had kids that did, I believe there's like a technical education center that does like hands-on automotive skills, that sort of thing. We had some kids from the homeschool community that accessed that in their high school years. So Bolingbrook and Valley View does a great job of just making those accessible to all of their students, whether it's students from the public school or private schools or homeschools. And so that was a great working arrangement.
Oh, that was really
and
cool.
then in addition, we also did that for some years, and then we also moved into, there are organizations that do sports for homeschool students. Crossroads Youth Center, which has their headquarters out in Big Rock, they have a whole variety of programs. I don't know with COVID how many of these are being offered right now. It's something, if someone wants to get more information, they should contact Crossroads directly. But in the past, and while we were a part of it, they offered baseball, football, volleyball. We did a lot of track and field. A lot of our kids did track and field that, and I actually helped to do some of the coaching for a few years. And then the students get together for practices. then when they're competing, they're competing with other small schools. Some of the small schools out to the west, the more rural areas, some of the small Christian Catholic schools, they would compete against those teams and could have, you know, one-on-one meets or 15 school meets, and the homeschool students were, you know, just there as a team like everyone else. So that was another great opportunity for competitive sports. So you had either way to go. So.
Well, that was cool. That's good. See,
Yeah.
the stuff I never knew. I had a friend back when I lived in Virginia, and she was going to homeschool her children. And when her daughter got of age, she said the disappointing part for her, now her daughter's in her 30s now, and she said she couldn't find as much support as you're talking about now.
Yeah.
She said it was limited. Now, she said there were people that were homeschooling that she could talk to, but she said she was afraid her daughter was going to miss out on the other activities that go with going to public school, especially as she got older. So she homeschooled her kids through elementary years, and then they went into, for middle school on up, they went into the public school system.
Yeah, I think that's something that's continuing to change and develop, is there is a greater and broader awareness of homeschooling and acceptance of homeschooling, and some really positive interactions as homeschool kids are doing things within the public school system. And so I would say there are more opportunities than ever before. It has really been wonderful. And I would actually commend Valley View School District in particular, because as our oldest, who's now 29 and married with 2 little girls of his own, but as he was in his junior high years and wanted to do track and field, when we contacted Valley View Schools, they had a policy that was kind of a case by case. And I don't know who's now the superintendent of the school board, but at that time I believe the gentleman was Dr. Schaafstal. And he had during the school board meeting, we came and you know, made a request. Can they simply change the policy so homeschool students can participate on the same level as everyone else? And they did that. And so that has just been wonderful. It was just a pleasure to work with them. And I think that Valley View is probably a little bit of an outlier. I know some of the other districts do impose more requirements on homeschool families, like you might have to participate in one or several classes. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes families are, you know, they're not always around. They might travel some or do things off, and they can't necessarily do a, you know, September through June class. So Valley View is just a great district to be in if you want to be able to homeschool but still access those extracurriculars that are available through the homeschool, through the public schools, and that your taxes are paying for. So.
Now, my last question for you is, when you homeschooled your kids all the way up to the 12th grade, and then they went on to college, how did they then fit in going from their small environment to a bigger school?
I'll tell you that the community college system around here is wonderful. So starting somewhere between the 9th grade to the 11th grade, our kids started to tap into, at that time we were at Joliet Junior College as our home community college. Now it's College of DuPage up in Winfield, you know, because we're in Winfield. But both community colleges were just wonderful about welcoming homeschool students. They were able to apply, you know, in the 9th, 10th, 11th grade year. And then what we did is we would have them just take one class for starters, an intro to computers or something like that, and kind of get their feet wet. If that went well, then they might start. We typically encourage them on math, because once they got through the pre-calculus, I didn't feel like I could teach them calculus in the home setting, but in the community college, I would describe it as a very nurturing environment. The professors have 24 students. They want to see them succeed. Mm-hmm. And so our kids were able to do really well in that setting, as opposed to getting at some of the bigger universities, those entry-level calculus classes, if you're starting those with a whole group of entering freshmen, sometimes they can be a little bit cutthroat, because they only want so many students to move into engineering or some of the other things. So that, by the time they reached 18 and they were graduating from high school, most of our kids have had at least a year's worth, or sometimes a year and a half's worth, of community college classes already under their belt, and they understand the demands of college classes, because they could start out one at a time and not be thrown from all high school classes to suddenly you've got 4 college classes, and you're responsible for all the timing and the schedules and making sure it's done. So.
My sister lives in Florida, and her 2 youngest girls, they were very smart. So they went in the 11th grade, and they still in high school, but they took community college classes.
Excellent.
And I got a big chuckle out of it because the community college graduation happened a week before their high school graduation. So they got their associate's degree the week before they got their high school diploma.
Oh, that's so funny. Good for them. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of flexibility that just helps our young people to really develop their talents, whether it's through homeschooling or through just directly accessing the community college. That's wonderful. So.
Yeah, the things. Well, do you have one last words of wisdom that you'd like to give to the viewers today about homeschooling?
I would just say it's a great opportunity. If you feel as if you might want to try it, but you're not sure, I would encourage you, go forward. You're not committing for a lifetime, but go forward for this school year. Access different groups. Heart Homeschool is based right here in Bolingbrook, and that's a fabulous homeschool opportunity. Also, there is a state organization, the Illinois Christian Home Educators, ICHE, and they have all kinds of resources, a free MP3 about starting to homeschool, what are frequently asked questions, what kind of getting started, what does the law say, all of that, and that's available on their website, or you can email them, info@iche.org. But there are just great resources, and take that first step, because I don't think you will ever be sorry that you do.
Ah, well, that's good. You gave us a lot of information today, Lorene. I really appreciate it, and thanks again for taking the time coming in. And everybody, if you want to homeschool, there'll be a lot of information at the end of this for you to check out. Or if you are just interested in some help to get you through the next quarter for your child being involved with e-learning, you could resource some of that information too, and it might give you some helpful hints. Thank you, and thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, cut. Were you okay with everything?
Yeah,
okay.
That was great.
I think it went really good.
I thought so too.
You were really just rolling. It was wonderful.
That went fast. I'm like, whoa, are we wrapping up here? But
Hello, Bolingbrook, and we are very lucky today because we're back with some sports. With us today, we have John Phillips, our sports extraordinaire. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Barb, for letting me be on your beautiful show that you do a great job with, 2020 Bolingbrook. And I just wanted to bring up a couple things about Barb Parker. I first knew Barb in the late to mid-90s. I coached her grandson, and I had this grandmother out there in the stand with a New York accent. And I'm thinking, where am I, in Brooklyn somewhere? No, I was in Bolingbrook, but it was Barb Parker that was rooting on her son. And we had a good year that year, and she got such a kick out of us running my signature play, and some of you people remember my signature play because I've coached your kids for a long time out there. And that was the Hokey Pokey. And the Hokey Pokey has a life of its own. So here's to all you people out there to remember the Hokey Pokey and how it affected kids' lives, because they loved that play. You know, Bolingbrook's a great town, and we have a high school football canceled. Moved it to, it's going to start February, hopefully, March, finish up in April. And, you know, for the kids, it's got to be a hard thing to do. I mean, they lost half their year last year, I mean, the COVID-19. And it's going to be a tough way to go for those kids that are training and are ready for fall football. They're not going to have it. Now, we've got some Bolingbrook kids that are going to go to different schools that are very good players. And they are going to go. We got one kid that's going to go to Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati. Got another kid that's going to go to University of Notre Dame. And another kid that's going to the University of Michigan. And that's Tyler McLaurin going to Michigan, 6'4", 6'3" linebacker. Came on strong at the end of the year. Very good player. And his career is going to be ahead of him when he gets to Michigan. But the kids that are going to get hurt by this are the kids that are just blossomed between their junior and senior year. And these colleges won't be able to see them until the fall, and they're going to have tape, and they're going to be a rush to sign kids, and some of those kids are going to fall through the cracks. And that's when we know Coach Ivelo talked to him a little bit, and, you know, he's going to have to do he's very good at getting kids into colleges. You know, we've been lucky in Bolingbrook. We've only had 2 coaches since almost the 80s, and that's Phil Acton, and then it went into Coach Ivelo. Coach Ivelo's been there, I think it's his 30th year right now. And Coach Acton was pretty close to 30 years also. So we've been very lucky. We only had 2 football coaches, think of that, in this town since 1980 coaching high school football as head coaches. And that's a pretty good record. And we've come into playoffs now 31 out of the last 32 years, I believe it is. And that's pretty consistent. And that's because of the coaching we have here. And then also you got to put in the Bolingbrook, the Trojans, been playing football very well for years. And now there's other teams that are coming up, leagues that people have started, even flag football's helped bring up Bolingbrook kids through the years, through the program. And we're going to have a good team again. Lincoln Way East is going to be there for us. Homewood Flossmoor is going to be solid. But, you know, we got now a year. Those kids that are going to be on the bubble and what they want to do going to the next level, they got 3-4 more months to get more physically fit, to grow into their bodies, get the weight room, get the endurance to play at the high level. And again, they got great leadership over there in the coaching department, and got to look forward to a good and a great football season. To 2020 Bolingbrook, and we're talking about high school football, and we're talking about football and high sports in this town, whether it's from BCB sports, you know, basketball, Trojan football, high school, all your high school sports, high school girls basketball, boys basketball, boys football. And that's where, you know, we didn't lose him, but he's going to be around. But we lost my broadcast partner for 19 years, Bolingbrook football, BCTV live, Bolingbrook football, again, and I'm talking about Mayor Claire. Now, Mayor Claire was a fan. He loved Bolingbrook sports. And I know he still does love, I'm talking in the past tense, but he loves Bolingbrook sports. And he really loved his basketball, he loved his football, but he loved all the youth sports. Anytime you need a parade, T-ball parade, Mayor Claire was there. Anytime you had a championship game or something, Mayor Claire was there. Anytime the high school needed something, Mayor Claire was there. That football field is magnificent. Facilities are magnificent. Mayor Claire was there. You needed football on TV, live, BCTV, football, live. Mayor Claire brought that to you. You needed the wiring to make that happen. Mayor Claire got that done. You needed new football uniforms, or you needed some uniforms for basketball or for tennis or for what. Mayor Claire was a guy to go see, and he got it done. And, you know, Roger was my broadcast partner. He loved doing football games on Friday night, home games. And, you know, of course, we had our favorite, after a Bolingbrook touchdown, we would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's a Raider touchdown." And then he would join in and go, "Arr!" So thank you, Mayor Claire. I know you're coming up in the booth this year when the season starts in February, March, April. I know you're going to get up there and be part of that culture that you provided for football, make this town proud. And we're going to miss you. But I know you're going to be there to say, "Arr!" Thank you, Bart Parker. Again, John Phillips for 2020 Bolingbrook, the Bart Parker Show. Thank you, Mayor. Hats off. Okay, we're back to the Barb Parker 2020 Bolingbrook Show. I'm John Phillips, and we're going to talk a little bit about sports. We just touched on a couple topics. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the NBA. And the NBA, if you've been watching, they're living in a bubble down in Orlando. Some guys are sneaking out at night. Not many, though. They haven't caught many, but some are. And so far, they've been doing a pretty good job. They haven't had the dreaded COVID down there at all. They haven't had many cases of that. Not like baseball with the Cardinals missing 12 games and things of that nature, but they've done a pretty good job with keeping people in line over there and making sure that they get tested and make sure that they're safe. The COVID-19, the dreaded COVID-19. And we want to talk to you about NBA, the Bulls. The Bulls aren't down at the bubble because the Bulls did not make the expanded playoff roster teams. So the Bulls are back home trying to figure out what they're going to do. They got to have the draft coming up after the season. They haven't had the draft yet. So they got to figure out what they're going to do with their roster. They have a new general manager. They got him from the Denver Nuggets. He's put together a pretty good team with the Nuggets. He's got a very good eye for talent. He played overseas. He went to Seton Hall College, didn't get drafted in the NBA, but was a great, great player overseas, won many world championships. He's a Lithuanian guy. So, he's got an eye for talent, and that's what I hope that he brings with the Bulls, because the last regime had no eye for talent. They've been on a rebuilding year since Jordan left the Bulls. And Eddie Curry didn't work out too well. I remember Eddie Curry playing over at B.J. Ward when he was in 8th grade. And he was about 6'8", 6'9", playing at B.J. Ward. I don't want to get on Eddie Curry, but 6'9", playing at B.J. Ward as an 8th grader, and he wasn't even dominating the games then. So when they drafted him in that first round, I'm thinking, what was Jerry Krause doing? But anyway, we got a guy now that looks like he's got an eye for talent, and that's what they've been lacking. They've been lacking a direction and lacking a guy that has an eye for talent and bringing that talent into Chicago. And I've heard some deals about a trade. They got a kid out of the Magic named Vukovic. Vooch is his nickname. He's 6'11", 260, two-time All-Star, averages 19 and 10. And they're looking at him being maybe a trade partner with the Bulls, and we'd have to get rid of a couple guys. Wendell Carter would have to go. I heard Thaddeus Young would have to go. Sarah Thompson, one of the backup guards has got to go, and a second-round pick in the 2021 draft. That's a big haul for a guy. Well, he's a two-time NBA player. He averages 19 and 10. So, do you make the trade? I don't know. You guys can discuss this. Barb, what do you think? You make that trade? Barb's a New Yorker. She doesn't know anything except the Knicks and the Nets. But anyway, we'll see. But here's the other deal. What do they do with their coach? They were told this new GM that he's going to have autonomy, going to do what he wants, but we're still with the same coach, Jim Boylan. And a lot of the players opened revolution last year at the end of the year over Jim Boylan, calling timeouts, being down 25 points. With 30 seconds ago, he's calling timeout for a teaching moment, which is okay for BCB basketball, but not so much okay for the NBA. But anyway, Jim Boylan seems to be the sticking point. Ownership, the Reinsdorf's kids running most of the show right now, and he doesn't want to part ways with Boylan, probably because of money. And but the GM was brought here to make changes, and I know that's a change that he wants to make. But his hands are tied. So the Bulls, unfortunately, are not down in Orlando. But there's some great players, young players down there. Some of you people might watch Ja Morant. Great player. He went to the Racers of Murray State. That's where college he went to, Murray State. And he'll be the odds-on Rookie of the Year this year. I mean, he will be the Rookie of the Year. If you haven't seen Ja Morant, you got to go see him. Or catch him on the TV or whatever, because he's a heck of a player. Then you got Devin Booker, who's been around 3-4 years. Damian Lillard hitting 50 points, 60 points. You'd like to watch him. good player. So there's a lot of good things happening in the NBA. Good players, a lot of scoring, a lot of guys taking over games, a lot of young kids coming into the league doing their thing. But let's just hope the Bulls can get back on track and they can start making the necessary changes they need to know. Would they want that trade? That'd be a good trade to discuss at home. Again, they get Vucevic from the Magic, but we'd have to get up Wendell Carter, Thaddeus Young, second-round pick in 2011, and then a couple other players that we'd throw in. So for a salary cap, I'm sure. So that's part of the NBA. Now the teams are looking good right now. Right now in the NBA, you got the Lakers. They're going to be good. You got the Celtics. Could be the final matchup. Celtics-Lakers, just like the old days. The Magic Bird combination back in those days. You got Toronto, who's surprisingly good after they lost, and you got Doc Rivers, who's still coaching the Clippers. And of course, you know, we go back as Proviso East guys, go way back with Doc Rivers to when Doc was playing in the 70s, mid-70s. And, you know, it's time. He should get another NBA title. He had an NBA title with the Celtics. So let's see what the Clippers can do against the Lakers. That would be a nice matchup to go into the finals. And the Celtics would probably play maybe Toronto. That would be another nice matchup to watch. And so we're getting that basketball fever back. And the NBA is a big thing. It's just the Bulls. We need to get something done there. We need to get moving. We brought in a GM. Let him do his thing. Let him give us the talent. That's what he's known for, bringing in talent, finding talent. And that's what we need in this town. We got to have a young star like a Ja Morant or a Booker. We got to have one of those stars like that. So that's the NBA. Playoffs will be coming, and it should be exciting. And let's just hope the Bulls can join the fun next year. So, baseball. You know, baseball had a long time. They didn't know if they were going to play. They didn't know if they were going to even have a season. Then they didn't have to negotiate this. They had to negotiate that. It'd be 100 games, 80 games, and they settled on 60 games. Well, lo and behold, now it's the August 12th, 13th, 14th, 14th, 13th of August right now as we do this show. 2020 Bolingbrook, by the way. Bart Parker, moderator. But the Cubs are 12-3. Now, 12-3, you'd say, yeah, it's got off to a good start. But wait a minute. 12-3, that's like 20% of the season's over with. 60-game season. So the Cubs are playing extremely well, and they can thank their starting pitching for that. And they have a new manager. As you might know, David Ross took over for Joe Madden. Everybody was sorry to see Joe Madden leave, and the reason why, he brought the Cubs the first world championship in over 100 years. And we got David Ross. David Ross is doing one heck of a job right now. Theo and the group made a good choice. And David Ross is ready for the challenge. But he's had some excellent pitching. You had Hendricks. You had Darvish. You had Chatwood. You got Mills. Pleasant surprise. And Johnny Lester, who's been spectacular as the start of the season, around the second week of August right now. And then their players, you know, they've had such a great year right now out of Ian Happ. Surprise. Bodie, very good year, bounce back year. And then they had Nico Horner. They picked up the kid from Cleveland, the second baseman. And they're actually playing very well, very, very good, sound baseball. And they're enthusiastic. If you listen, there's no fans at these games. So the crowd noise is crazy, you know, they pipe in that crowd noise, but then you always hear the Cubs in the background. That team is together, and they're playing as a team that could get into the World Series. Now, who would they play to get through to that World Series? Right now, it looks like it's got to go through the Dodgers or the Padres, with Atlanta being a pretty good team on the other side, and the Washington Nationals are still trying to find their way. So the Cubs' Achilles heel, though, right now is their bullpen. And the bullpen is just people there's no more Pedro Strop. There's no more Cizek. They're all Cizek's with the White Sox. Pedro Strup's with the Reds. So they're having a little trouble. They're having a good success with the bullpen. The guy that they're not having any success with it right now is Craig Kimbrell. And Kimbrell's got an ERA of 22 runs a game, 23 runs a game. So that's got to change. But they've been getting a lot of good pitching from their starters, and they're playing solid D. And the Cubs could find them some way to get back in the World Series. Again, it's 12-3 after 20% of the season, but hey, next week it'll be half the season's gone. Play 10 games in a week sometimes. So let's all get on the David Ross bandwagon and get the Cubs into the World Series. Now, as you know, some of you know, I used to go to spring training. I went to spring training this year for my 40th year. 39th year of going into spring training with the Cubs, and they canceled spring training 3 days before I left to go. They said no more games. But I went anyway. So I went to spring training, played golf for 5-6 days in a row, and then they started closing the restaurants. They started closing the gin mills. They started closing the casinos. They started closing the pool at my hotel. And then I said, I got to get out of here. But when I got there, they gave me a Ford 150 truck because they had no cars available. So they gave me a Ford 150 truck to drive. I said, could I drive it home? And the rental company said, no, you can't drive that car home. So I had to get on a plane. All my flights were getting canceled. So I finally got on a plane. It cost me $25 to fly home. But it cost me $35 for my golf clubs and $35 for my bags. So the bags cost more than me flying home. And it was a great time. I'm glad I went. My kids all said, you should have an asterisk now. I go, why would I need an asterisk? They said, well, you didn't see any spring training games. I said, no, they should have the asterisk. I don't need the asterisk. They should have it. They did not play. They canceled spring training. I didn't cancel it. So next year, 2021, we'll have our 40th year. And I'll even bring my buddy Jerome Strickland along with me, who I took there probably in like 1998. And he's been going every year since, except for a couple health reasons. And we'll look forward to seeing him this year. He was going to go this year, but his family said they'd disown him if he'd come to spring training this year. So that's a good story, huh, Barb? You like that one? That's good. And anyway, let's get to the White Sox. White Sox got a heck of a team. They got Robert, up-and-coming star, center field. They got two players, great players that the Cubs gave them for Jose Quintana. Yeah, Jose Quintana. Dylan Cease is going to be an 18, 20-game winner someday in the major leagues. And they got the other kid is a killer. He's going to hit 30, 40 home runs a year. And he's well on his way. And the Sox are going to have a good team. They're a little bit young right now in the pitching department. They got a lot of arm problems. And Eloy Jimenez is the guy that hits 30, 40 home runs. And he's going to be a heck of a player. If he can stay out of the netting. Sometimes he falls in the netting down the left field line. He did that twice in a week already. But he's going to be a heck of a player. So baseball's back. And World Series is going to happen sometime toward the end of November or middle of November. And they've got expanded playoffs, so more teams can get in, so there'll be more excitement. And can't wait to see how this season finishes out. And we're going to segue over to the Blackhawks, who made the playoffs and won their first round victory, 3-1, 3-1 against Edmonton Oilers. And it was in Edmonton. All the games were in Edmonton. Again, the NHL has their little bubble, but they got one in Alberta, they got one in Edmonton, I think the other one's in Toronto. But they have their little bubble, and the Hawks played very well to get in the playoffs. They beat Edmonton 3-1. And if you watched that series, it was exciting games, and Edmonton has a lot of talent, but the Hawks, you know, they got some young talent that are coming on now. And they got still the old guard with Taze and Kane, Saad, and they got Corey Crawford, who was magnificent in that last game for all you hockey players out there. He was, you know, he had his best game of the year, obviously, and they won. So now they're in the first round of the actual playoffs. That was the play-in series to get in. Now the first round, they're playing the number 2 seed. The number 1 seed they're playing the number 1 seed, Las Vegas. And they had their first game the other night. The Hawks had a season-low 20 shots on goal. Wasn't very good. They're playing a heck of a team, though. This Vegas team has been good for a couple of years now. And lo and behold, they traded their goalie, one of their goalies, Lerner. They had 2 goalies, Crawford and Lerner. And he ended up playing for Vegas, and they're playing against the goalie that was their teammate about 4 months ago. So he had an outstanding game, but the Hawks really didn't do much. That defense just stifled them for Vegas. And today is Thursday, the 13th of August. They play today the second game in that series at 3:30 today. And we'll see. The Hawks have a chance of coming through in that series. But the problem is they're playing one of the top teams in hockey, and they're a very close forechecking team. And they have scorers, and they have a good system. And the Blackhawks are just trying to really make a name for themselves. They have a lot of young players. This Dotch, the first-round pick last year, he's only 18, 19 years old. He's about 6'5", and he put on about 30 pounds of muscle during the delay of the season, and he's become a different player if you've been watching him. And they got Kubelek, who's scored 30 goals for the year, rookie. Another guy that's got some power, and they still got, like I said, Saad and Kane and Tays. And the NHL is doing it right. They have a bubble. They got 4 different locations for the bubble. And they're so far had no problems. So let's hope that the Hawks make some dents. If not, for next year, they're going to look good with the young kids getting a year older. And we should find out. Hockey's fun to watch. You know, Stanley Cup hockey is one of the best sports to watch. You got Eddie Olczyk and Pat doing the games, and it's just a good watch. So if you get a chance, catch the Blackhawks. And again, this is John Phillips with Bolingbrook 2020 and Barb Parker. Thank you, Barb, for having me on today.
Okay, John. Thanks for that wonderful trip down memory lane. Not only do I remember it well, it was my first introduction to Bolingbrook Community Basketball and my grandson making it to the championship game, but also my youngest granddaughter was born then, and that's why I was here for that length of time. And yes, I do know how to do the hokey pokey with putting my left and my right arm and my leg in and shaking all around. And with the Bulls, yes, they should make that trade. I totally agree. And another thing, John, as far as asterisks go, with this crazy year that we're having, I think the whole year should be an asterisk, and every person gets one, maybe 2. And as you can see, I am a diehard New York sports fan. I love all my sports teams, especially my Yankees. And hopefully this year, the Yankees can beat the Cubs in the World Series. Bolingbrook, take care, and let's go Yankees. Hello, Bolingbrook, and welcome back. With me today is Sandy Carlson, and she's one of Bolingbrook's own. She's a therapist and a counsel right here in Bolingbrook. Sandy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Barb.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into some of the other questions?
Sure. I've been a resident of Bolingbrook for 25 years, and I've had a practice in Bolingbrook for 20 years. I work with adults and kids, families, and kind of do whatever's necessary. So.
Well, that's good. And I'm sure right now with COVID, you've probably gotten many more phone calls from people.
Yeah, we're seeing an increase. The mental health community is, noticing a lot of increase in anxiety and increase in depression. Also, there's increases in drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and child abuse. So people are under a lot of stress, and it's really being reflected in the statistics with mental health.
Now, with the adults, are they finding it harder to cope, so they're drinking more and then having, abuse go on in the home?
Yes, yeah, yeah. And well, one of the things that happens to people under tremendous stress is that we tend to regress to old behaviors. So people who haven't had much to drink in years maybe have gone back to old drinking behaviors, or people who haven't smoked a cigarette in decades are smoking again. And you see that in children too. They'll regress. So maybe you got, a kid who hasn't sucked their thumb in a long time and now they're sucking their thumb. That's pretty normal under tremendous stress. And so I think, what we're seeing is layer upon layer of anxiety with all that's going on right now between, you hear a lot about the election. People are very anxious about that. Obviously, COVID, and then employment. People are really scared about their jobs. So there's a lot of layers. And then the stress of right now trying to figure out how to, educate your children through e-learning and keep working and doing everything else parents have to do in the course of a day.
Now, are there any tips that as adults you could give them to maybe alleviate or help alleviate some of the anxiety they're feeling?
Yeah. First off, kids are very reactive. They pick up, they're very intuitive, and they pick up their emotional cues from the adults in their life. And so if the parents are extremely anxious, the kids are going to be anxious. Going back to school, if the teachers are really anxious, the kids would be really anxious, right? So one of the things as a parent is to work on your own anxieties. There are lots of things and resources to help with that, and I'll talk about a few. And whatever works for adults works for kids. Some things, they sound really corny, but they work. For example, deep breathing. What happens when we get very anxious is we start to breathe in a more shallow, rapid way, right? Oftentimes, if we change what we're doing physically, our mind will follow our body. So, example, if you're feeling really depressed and you start smiling, your brain kind of perks up a little, like, oh, I think we're happy. If we start to breathe deeply, what happens is our body's telling our brain that we're okay, we're fine. What anxiety is about is, fear of what's next, the future. And so part of it is to say, right here, this moment, I'm really okay. I don't have COVID, I'm okay. I'm safe, I'm fed, everything right now is okay. Same thing works for children, is to have them practice deep breathing. The most effective kind of deep breathing is diaphragmatic breathing, which singers do. They get that volume because they use their diaphragm, right? That pulls more oxygen in, it helps the lungs fill up more. Another thing to see if you're breathing deeply enough is you can feel your lungs, actually through here. And if you breathe deep enough, you can feel this part of your lungs start to expand. So you're getting the whole lung. And so that's one way to check. The other is to hold your stomach, your hand on your tummy, and feel your diaphragm moving up and down.
Now, I'm listening to you say that, and what's running through my mind when I go to the doctor for a checkup, and they say, okay, breathe in deep for me, and you go, well, he's saying letting it out, and I'm still not ready to breathe out yet. And so I'm going, so is that the type of breathing you're talking about?
Yeah. And any kind of meditation that they'll talk about, teach how to deep breathe. Yoga, they teach you deep breathing. Like I said, singers know how to deep breathe. It is using, your diaphragm's a huge muscle, okay? And when you use it, it pulls down the air into the lungs. It just, so you get more in your lungs. And one of the things then is to breathe in slowly, and a lot of times it helps to count, and then exhale as slowly as you've breathed in. So
now if you're doing the breathing, how many of them should you do where you should start to feel a little bit relaxed?
It doesn't take long. It's amazing. Usually within a few seconds, people start to feel a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Again, you're doing a couple things. You're telling your brain we're okay right now, and you're getting more oxygen in, okay? And you start to relax when you deep breathe. So that's one of the things. And again, it sounds so simple, but it actually really works effectively. Another thing that is important in dealing with anxiety is to exercise. Because what happens with anxiety is stress hormones are released, right? And when we exercise, we get those stress hormones out of our body. And so we feel better. So a great remedy for anxiety is exercise for both adults and kids. It's really important for children, you know, to be able to go out and run and play and to burn off some of that steam.
So even a nice walk.
A nice walk, yes.
The whole family could go and do it and relax while they're out there before they come back in.
Right. A lot of people find being in nature helps relax them, is calming for them. One of the things that's difficult about anxiety as opposed to depression is we need anxiety, right? Anxiety protects us. Our brains are designed to react. If a lion or tiger or bear is coming to get us, we're going to be anxious, right? And all these hormones are released that cause us to, you know, run away or fight or flight. And what happens with anxiety is then it's just too sensitive, right? It's reacting to things that aren't threats, and even to the point of, for some people, panic attacks. It's kind of like your alarm system's just too sensitive, and it's perceiving threat where there is none. And so anxiety serves a purpose, right? It's just that it's easy to have it get out of control. That's the hard part
So
of
it's
anxiety.
figuring out the right way to manage it in a good way.
Right, right. And I think sometimes people get anxious about being anxious. And so part of it is recognizing, first off, we live in anxious times. Anxiety is contagious. There's such a thing called societal anxiety, and we've seen periods of that in our culture. When it was first identified was during the McCarthy era, when it was a highly anxious time in this country. And then again, after 9/11, people were highly anxious after that, right? The whole society was anxious. Well, we're back in an anxious time now. And so part of it, I think, too, is telling yourself, you know, I'm okay. These are anxious times. And to not get anxious about feeling a little more anxious than normal. If your anxiety or your child's anxiety becomes problematic, where people are starting to have problems eating, sleeping, see kids, a lot of times they'll start to complain of tummy aches a lot. People have headaches. When it starts to interfere with daily living, that's the point where you need to talk to somebody, get some help with your anxiety. So that's the point. You know, like what point do you go? So if it's causing trouble, then, you know, reach out.
Do people, though, realize that they're having trouble then? Or does somebody need to point it out? Like if you complain a couple of days, well, oh my God, my head was killing me and everything. You may not even think that it's related, or you have stomach issues, you just, oh, I got the flu, oh, you know, I got the little. Does somebody else need to tell you, or does you finally just like, oh, I might have something going on with me?
Yes, I've had that happen both ways, where people come in because they call and they asked for an appointment because they are experiencing anxiety. And sometimes people come in and they're just not sure what's going on, but they don't feel well. They know something's up, but they can't identify it. And so oftentimes then once you identify what anxiety is, and then we can start to look at the tools that mental health people have to help people cope with anxiety.
Now, do people ever take medication for anxiety?
Yes.
They do?
Oh, yeah. There are basically two kinds of meds that are used. One is antidepressants, a category of drugs called SSRIs. Prozac is the first one. There's a whole bunch now of SSRIs. And what they do, you take them on a daily basis, and they work to help with both anxiety and depression. Then there are specific anti-anxiety meds, and those are short-acting. You take them if things are really bad, or you're going to go into a situation where you're highly anxious and you want, like flying on an airplane, for example. People might get Ativan or Xanax are examples.
My aunt used to have 2 martinis before she would get on a plane.
That's an excellent point, because alcohol is a great anti-anxiety. A lot of people get into abusing alcohol because they're highly anxious, especially women. So, yeah, it's liquid depression. Alcohol is a depressant, but it's an anti-anxiety. So, but there are better ways to treat it than, you know, a couple drinks aren't going to hurt anybody. But, yeah, drinking on the plane would be one way. Another way is to, you know, people get some medicine from their doctor, a couple of Xanax or something to take. When people are having a really tough time with anxiety, then doctors will prescribe that to take as needed. And oftentimes people, one of the things about anxiety is it really interferes with falling asleep. And so, because you lay there and your brain won't turn off, and it keeps going, and you keep thinking and thinking and thinking, and you can't sleep. And so the anti-anxiety meds will help calm that down, and so people can get some rest. And one of the things that happens is that when you're not getting good rest, the depression and anxiety get worse, and both depression and anxiety interfere with sleep. So
Now, hearing you say that about your brain not turning off, during my career when I was faced with something new that I had to do, I might have a night like that, like my brain would be going. There was one time, the Limited just bought us, and we had to go to Columbus, Ohio, and I had to put on a meeting for 150 people for the first time with people I didn't even know. And I went to sleep. When I woke up in the morning and I looked around my headboard, Post-it notes were all over the place, and I have no clue that I did that. Absolutely none. But when I was going to, my brain would not turn off.
Yeah.
And at some point, I guess it must have, or it told me I needed to write these things down, and I woke up, but I had no clue about it.
yeah, but that's what anxiety will do. And that's one of the things writing stuff down. Often have kids and adults do is a worry list. It sounds silly, but again, these are tricks that work. Is then you keep a list of things you're worried about, because anxiety is worry. Oftentimes that's why I explain it to children. They don't understand the word anxious, right? But little kids. But to say, do you worry, think about things a lot and wonder if bad things are going to happen? Like, yeah. So it's to keep a worry list and write down what your worries are, and then have a specific worry time. And then when the worry pops in your head, you remind yourself, it's on my list. I will worry about it at my worry time, which is 6 to 6:15, for example, right? Other people will have a worry box where they keep slips of paper, put their worries in a little box and keep it there. And then if they need to worry about it, it's there and they know they have it. So they don't have to keep thinking about it. They have the worry documented. Again, it's kind of a trick to play on your brain. And like, oh, we're okay. We got it written down. We can worry about that later. So,
Oh, that's a good one.
yeah, I mean, they're little, bitty tricks. Another thing that's very effective is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the things that we have are negative thoughts. We all have automatic negative thoughts. And those can really increase when a person has anxiety or depression. And so one of the things we teach people is to identify those thoughts that are negative thoughts and then learn ways to talk back to them or refute them. It's a lot of times, it's another thing, is identifying the thought as an anxious thought and then kind of putting it in its place. Like, you behave, because I'm not gonna, go along with you on this. Good examples of anxious thoughts, for example, often see perfectionism is, things must be perfect. If it's not perfect, it's not valid, it's not good enough. You see a lot of times anxious people do that, or I should do this, I must do that. Words like should, must, ought, always, those are always negative thoughts. Because who said you have to be perfect? Right? No one.
It's usually on yourself.
Oh yeah, we do this to ourselves. And so we beat ourselves up. And that's one of the things I've talked a lot about with people since COVID, is none of us know how to do a pandemic. Yeah. In the beginning, we first started in March doing teletherapy. And so the insurance companies allowed us to see our clients through the computer, which has been really helpful, to rather than take away mental health care, that we could do it this way. And, I lost my train of thought.
Telemedicine.
Oh, so through telemedicine then, we're able to stay connected and, again, keep teaching these skills to people. And helping them talk back to those negative thoughts. Right? What I was going to say too is if we can bring the negative thoughts down, to like 60% of the time it's negative talking to yourself, there's a marked improvement in mental health. So it's called CBT, is really effective in helping with both anxiety and depression.
Sometimes we need to celebrate our little victories too, and we might not take them as a victory, but sometimes just getting out of bed is a plus for the day.
You bet.
That you went into the shower and put on clean clothes was
Yes.
a plus, you know.
Right. Right. And yeah, that's going back to that, being kind and gracious to ourselves. So we don't know how to do a pandemic. I've never done therapy in a pandemic before, so it was quite a learning curve, right? But it's being kind and gracious. And a lot of people have reported initially a lack of motivation, you know, that in March, April, May, that it was a really tough time to keep yourself motivated. At this point, what I'm hearing, which is interesting, is that we're, 5-6 months into it now, is people feel like they're, every day is Groundhog Day. I get up and I do the same thing every day. I get up, I go sit in front of my computer, you know, I watch a little TV after work, and I go to bed. I don't go anywhere. I'm not seeing people, right? It's just this sort of monotony is getting to people too. And I think it's wearing on people's nerves at this point.
I've tried to keep my routine. Like on the weekends, I've always done flavored coffee in the morning, so I do that. On Fridays, I would buy myself a little bouquet of flowers to have. So I'm keeping that, although now I shop with the old people, so I buy it on Thursday.
Yeah.
But I've tried to keep things like in a routine, and I do shake it up a little bit with things that I do. Like, you know, I have to say this. I haven't really cooked a whole lot, but I do a lot of takeout. So I'll try new place or a new item from a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to keep it going. Because for me, I live by myself. It's me and my 2 puppies, so.
Yeah, yeah, and I think once kids go back to school, too, is trying to keep as much routine. Having them get up, brush their teeth, yeah, comb their hair, put on clothes instead of sitting in PJs all day. That structure for children makes them feel more secure. And so structure is really important for kids. It's really important for all of us, but especially for children. So I think as we're doing, you know, the e-learning to try to have as much structure as possible. And I know what Valley View, for example, has a pretty structured day for kids, when they start, when they eat lunch, when the day ends. And so I think that, you know, be really helpful for the kids to know what to expect.
One of the things that I thought too is that to have a space for them, even if it's at your kitchen table,
Yeah.
let it be their space for their learning time. And
Right.
that's where they go and do it. So it
Yeah.
fits in right with your structure.
Right. Yeah, it goes back to the structure. And again, you know, I think when kids, if they're talking about feeling worried or anxious about things, one of the tendencies we have as adults is to kind of dismiss it and say, "Oh, you shouldn't be worried." That doesn't take away the worry, right? It just kind of puts it underground, and the child stops talking about it. And so it's important to validate if your child's anxious about things, to say, "Yeah, these, you know, I kind of worry about this too," or I'm wondering how school's going to go as well. I worry about the virus. You know, I want everyone to be safe. I think the other thing is it's important to be honest with our kids about what's going on, because if you lie and then they find out later that you've lied, you've lost credibility, and they're going to stop asking you, right? So if your kid's asking you some pretty pointed questions about the virus, you would answer in a way that's age appropriate, but honestly what's going on.
And as best as you can, because
As
they could
best as
ask
you
you, the kids are so smart, and
Yeah.
they could ask you a question that floors you that you don't know the answer to. And it's perfectly okay to say, "Oh, I haven't thought about that, and I'm not sure. We're going to have to find out."
Yeah.
And maybe research together then.
Right. I call those teachable moments. I had one with my grandson. My first career was a nurse. I was a nurse for 20 years. And so we had a discussion about why hand washing was so important in this time of coronavirus. And one of the things we know about the virus is it's covered with a layer of fat. So it's DNA and then this fatty layer. And what soap does is it breaks up fat, right? So you put your Dawn and your greasy water in the sink and you see it, right? So that's what soap and water is doing to the virus. And so we had a little biology lesson, you know, about washing hands and why it's important and what it does to the virus. And so there's lots of teachable moments that occur for a child that you can use. And again, let's go research, let's find out. And with Google, we have it all at our fingertips. So.
That is true.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like in 1918 to be, you know, locked down without television or internet or radio. Those people had nothing, and they did it, so we can do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
We're-
We're stronger than we think.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just need to give yourself a pat on the back when you wake up in the morning and just take it from there.
One of the things I've found, I talk often about this as a therapist, is I am always amazed by the resiliency of the human spirit. People go through horrendous things, and they come out and they're okay. You know, oftentimes they have to work through what happened. We see that with a lot of trauma. They have to do some healing work, but we call it post-traumatic strength. When we get through this, we're going to be stronger people because this adversity. I think have all learned things about ourselves as well. I've learned, for example, that running around a lot is overrated. That leading a little more quiet lifestyle, it's not so bad. I'm kind of liking it. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that understanding that we are resilient people, we will survive what's going on, and communicating that to our kids that we're tough. We're created to survive and to overcome adversity. So.
Well, that's good. Sandy, you gave us a bunch of good information, and hopefully some of the parents will take it to heart and deal with their kids as they're going back e-learning for the first quarter for now.
Yes. Just want to mention, the Illinois Department of Public Health has a resource now. They have a hotline for mental health issues. Again, in the mental health community, we've been talking and expecting a pandemic of mental health issues as we continue on in this. And so, the government and other people are creating resources to help people through this. But if you go to the Illinois Department of Public Health, they do have a hotline, so you can call someone if you're having a really rough time.
Okay. We'll show that number.
Okay.
With
great.
that, and that'd be good.
I should have brought it. I didn't think of it.
No, that's okay. I could look it up.
Okay.
Well, Sandy, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and you taking the time to let the residents of Bolingbrook know that there are resources for them and tips that they could do at home to help alleviate any anxiety that could be going on, both with them and their children.
Yes, absolutely.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bolingbrook, you've just got a lot of helpful hints. I hope you take them to heart. See that? Hello, Bolingbrook, and welcome back. With me today is Nicole McGowan, and she works with our Bolingbrook Fire Department. She's one of the finest that's there. Nicole, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into all the fire business?
Thank you. Well, I'm married, and I have a daughter who's 14, so learning the trials and tribulations of that. We live in Plainfield and spend most of my time doing gardening and working out and running her around to softball. My husband is a mechanic and pretty big into racing, so we like to do that as well. And a little bit about my background. I actually was sporty, athletic, which being in a firefighting business kind of goes hand in hand. But I really enjoyed wrapping up every little ache and pain, and it just kind of grew from there. And so that's how I found my way to the fire service.
Ah, well, that's good. Now, is there anything in your background that made you want to become a firefighter then? Because you could have went to medical school or become a nurse with the medical part, but you're a firefighter.
Yes. I initially knew I liked the medical field. I got my I received my bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois in kinesiology, which is the study of movement. I wanted to become an athletic trainer. And from there, I also had an uncle who was a fireman at Lockport. So my cousin, her and I spent a lot of times, we were like sisters, and part of our daily routine when I stayed out there was to make our way to the fire department. And so I always thought it was cool, but never thought it was a career at that point. So when I was in college, I got involved with a group that did first aid for the students in the football stand. So we were kind of like a first responder type deal for football games, volleyball games, any sporting events. So we would get free entry into the game was kind of our payment, and I really liked that. And we went to some other colleges, and that's when I got a taste of first responders. So when I was graduated from U of I, and I was working at Moraine Valley in the fitness center, that's when I had the opportunity for further college, and I took my EMTB class there. So not only with my uncle being in the fire service when I was rather young, not to be on the Debbie Downer side, but my father got really sick in my 8th grade year, and when the paramedics came, I was very intrigued in whatnot and how they operated on a very dire situation, and that was also another thing that kind of intrigued me as to how they dealt with it. And so those couple of things together is where my passion for paramedicing graduated from. So when I was working at Moraine Valley, I then had the opportunity to go to paramedic school, and I fell in love with it, and I didn't look back from then.
Now, when you went through firefighting training,
Yes.
were there other females in the class with you, or were you one of the only one, or one of a few?
No, there were 3 of us.
Okay.
Going back a few years, but yes, there was 3 of us. I was hired by a company called Paramedic Services of Illinois. They are a contracted company for paramedics and firefighters. So they're the ones that sponsored me to go to the fire academy. And there were 3 of us in the academy, and we went through Darien Woodridge's fire academy at the time. Had a great experience. 8 weeks long, and we do PT or physical therapy training, excuse me, in the morning. We do some running and stuff, and then we do our fire activities based on whatever the topic was for the day from there. So yes, there's always been 1 or 2 with me along the way. So.
Oh, that's good, because Chicago Fire is a big hit show that's on TV.
Yes.
So do people ask you about Chicago Fire? And if so, do they ask you, is what goes on real in your life as a firefighter?
Yes, they ask us if we watch it. A couple of us do. We call it our buff show, but not so much for what they do. I know it's based on real life calls that they have had with their team that they work with the writers. However, fire situations, it's nowhere near like that. And it just wouldn't make for good TV to have just a blacked out screen. You really spend a lot of time in the dark and not seeing very much this far off of your face. And that's how a real fire scene is. But we like the antics of it. So.
Good. There's a lot of interaction with the people, so you get the life story of that. So I guess if you really are a firefighter, you could look at it just like, okay, this is relaxing. Somebody else is doing their dirty work, but oh, look at, he's now having dinner with that one. Little bit of a soap opera for you.
Yes, there's certainly how they kind of come and go at the fire station and do their own thing. That is absolutely not how the fire service is. We are accounted for. We leave as a group. We wouldn't just get in a rig and drive across town to go take care of, you know, police business.
Something personal.
Yeah, police business, or get involved in any of that, or something personal, like you said. That just doesn't happen.
All right,
in
now
real
with
life.
Chicago Fire, they always show the cooking that goes on there, okay?
Yes.
And it usually seems to be some specific person that's designated to do the cooking. Either
Yes.
they're punishing them for something, or they actually know how to cook.
Yes.
Now, at your station, is there somebody that's designated to be the cook?
We share the responsibilities at my station. I do tend to float a little bit, so each station is different. We do have some really phenomenal cooks in the fire service, so that's why a lot of us are really into fitness to help counteract that. But our station, we share the duties a little bit. I'm a little unique in my situation that during my shift time from 8 to 5, I'm out of the station doing fire prevention duties. So when I come back, I try to help out if they don't have, if the ambulance crew is the one that's cooking and they go out on a call, I try to take that over for them and help them out the best that I can.
Yeah, a good team member.
Yeah.
That's good. Now, you mentioned fire prevention duties.
Yes.
What does that entail? Are you going to schools to talk about fire prevention, or are you going to people's homes and doing going through a checklist with them to see what may need to be fixed?
Actually, neither one of those things.
Okay.
I'm out doing more of the construction inspections.
Okay.
The fire marshal approves the plans as to how a building's supposed to be built, and then I'm one of a team of 3 that goes out and makes sure that the building is being built to those plans and make sure that those specifications are up to code, and we're the first step in the firefighting safety, not only for the public but for ourselves, make sure our systems are in the appropriate manner and that they're working properly before anybody gets to occupy that building and conduct business.
Okay. Now, according to your shirt, you're also
Yes.
an inspector.
Yes, that's where the inspector part comes in.
So inspecting also the building construction, but what about when there was a fire? Do you go then and determine whether it was faulty wire, somebody was cooking in oil, or arson?
Yes, I'm also on the origin and cause team as a fire investigator, not to be confused as well with an arson investigator, which I do both. So yes, we have a fire. I go out, depending on how big it is, we call in more members from the team, but we document the scene, we go through the scene, we determine the origin and cause of it. If it unfortunately is incendiary measures, me and a couple of select others that are on the arson team, we can follow it through its arrest if needed. Thankfully, we haven't had to deal with that too much here in Bolingbrook, but we follow it through those steps, and we can take it all the way into court and be called into court for our
Now, part of the investigation then, do you also then determine when it's safe for the family to go back into their home, either to collect some things or to start rebuilding?
Yes, we are the last. The origin and cause team is essentially the last people on scene, and we will also help the homeowners if their house isn't inhabitable. We call in Red Cross, we help them out with that, we make sure that they have somewhere to go for the night and that they're going to be provided for. We help walk them through making sure they call their insurance companies and dealing with that as well.
When I was in the 6th grade, and I'm going back many years ago, I'm from New York City, and our apartment burned down.
Oh boy.
And the only clothes we had is our washing machine broke, and my mother sent my sister and I to the laundromat we each had a load of clothes to do. Those were the only clothes we had. We lost everything in the fire. But the funny thing, my mom, we used to have dumbwaiters, and we lived on the 5th floor walk up, and my mom is talking to the neighbor, and my mom was a smoker, and so was our neighbor. And she's like, I think we're smoking too much. She says, I'm seeing some smoke come through the back bedroom. So she calls my father, and my father, big mistake he does, he goes down there, opens the door, and you could see it. My mother had been mopping the floor, and she had the mop there, and he harpooned it through the window, and the flames came up. They had to run and leave.
Oh, jeez.
And everything,
Scary.
we lost everything. So my neighbor's daughter comes and gets us at the laundromat, and she said, there's a fire on our building. We said, whose building? She says, our building. Whose apartment? Our apartment. We go running. But yeah, it's a traumatic experience. And I mean, I was young then. I was 10 years old when we had our fire. I can't imagine today going through it.
Yes, and unfortunately we've had some Christmas fires and whatnot, and in those situations we have such a great group of, I don't want to say just guys, but we are such a great group of firemen that we have crews have put together their own money and made sure that kids had toys for Christmas. We definitely, as much as strangely enough, we enjoy to do our job and like to fight fires. We certainly don't ever want to see somebody lose their home and their belongings, and we do everything to help them replace all of that.
Oh, that's right. And you know, stuff like that you don't even see all the time. There's so much good that goes on between the firefighters and police officers that don't always make the headlines.
Yes.
And things.
We have a lot of charities, and in fact, if I can do a little plug.
Go right ahead.
The fire department, Bolingbrook Local 3005, we are very big in doing Fill the Boot for MDA. Due to COVID circumstances, we were unable to do that. So we are, in October 19th, we are doing a 24-hour treadmill run to keep the treadmills going. I am one of the team members that will be running, and we're going to raise our funds for MDA that way.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're pretty excited, and we're still a little bit in the working phase, but we do know it's October 19th for 24 hours, and there's
Please let me know, and I'll help share some of the things, and maybe we could get some more people involved to raise some money, because that's really what you just need right now.
Yes.
Is just some dollars to come in to help.
Yes, we've always worked well with a couple of local establishments with raising funds for MDA. We have prided ourselves on, I don't recall last year's numbers, but we have been well over the $10,000 mark, and
Wow.
our goal is always to keep increasing from there.
Well,
And yes, I'll be more than happy to also provide the gentleman who's really spearheading this. Jimmy Chow is helping out immensely in
I see
getting
his
it
name
all.
a lot on Facebook.
Yes, yes, he is organizing the event for us, so he's our main coordinator for
Okay,
this.
well, that's good. And see, things like that need to get out more to see, which leads me to my other question that I had for you is community involvement. So you've answered it right there, at least as a department.
Yes, that is a department thing, and then also talking about the community risk group, and that's where we go and do the home surveys, which you had kind of asked about that earlier. Well, I believe there is the sign up online now. Not only, we used to do, I shouldn't say used to, again, modifying everything with COVID. At the Jubilee, we normally would have a table to explain that program to residents of Bolingbrook, but we will come to the house and do a fire safety check and help improve fire safety in the home. We check the smoke alarms. We can install new ones if needed. We also do some basic fireplace answers for that, because we do have had some chimney fires in the past, kitchen safety, those types of things, and we'll come in the home and help you out with that.
I know one of the things what my vet gave me, and I said, I think it was a good idea. I have a sticker that I put on the back of my door. I have like 2 ways to get into my house, and I have it so that the fire department will know I don't have my birds anymore, but I have dogs only now, but there's 2 dogs in the house, little, that could hide very easily. I mean,
Yes.
one's only 5 pounds, so.
Yes, they like to run a little bit. The pet oxygen modalities, so if we do have animals that are in a fire that we think they can be savable, we have the ability to give them oxygen.
Oh, that's good.
I forgot what group that gave that to us, so I apologize to that
No,
group.
that's
but
okay.
So we do carry those. Unfortunately, we've had more pet issues through fires than thankfully we've had actual human casualties by any means. So,
Well, that's good. I mean, bad for the pets, but you know.
but we have done really well, and we like having the extra equipment to help when we can. So,
Well, I have another question for you.
Mhm.
When you're pulling up to a fire, like what goes through your head? Do you get there and think, oh, I have to assess this situation, or I'm just going to run right in and save somebody?
even at the firefighter level, we always have to do a risk-benefit analysis. It sounds mean, but unfortunately, we always have to account for our own safety versus what we're seeing. So yes, we don't just rush in. You have to evaluate the incident. Risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little. So with that being said, we do look at conditions, we look at the type of home, we do it in a very quick manner It's not like we're sitting there for 20 minutes, but all those things are in our head while we're doing that job. But we also have pre-assigned assignments as we're getting off the vehicle. And whether you're driving, or we call it the right seat, the lieutenant, if the lieutenant's not there and somebody's acting in his position, we all have a job to do that we know. So we're also focused on what our particular job is for the day. So you really don't have time to have concerns, but yet our training prepares us that we don't, that we make those decisions very calculated and quickly, and that we know that we're confident in what the decisions that we're making at that time.
Yeah, because I think, like, if it was my house coming in, my thing would be, I'm just going in to save what, you know, if nobody was in there, I guess it would be a different story. But like my 2 little babies now, you know, that's who lives in the house. So running in to get them, I don't think I would sit and wait. But you guys are trained to do that, to make sure that not only you're safe, but you do the correct rescue.
Yes. And it's not all about life safety. It is also about property conservation. It's people's homes, their lives. So we do our best to make sure that we're accounting for all of that. Yes, obviously life safety is our top priority, but you know, especially a home, we want to save that home, and we want to make sure that we're not losing other homes or whatever other businesses, because those have been affected in recent times. We've had a couple of fires where one was involved, but it also affected others as well. It's just not.
Just takes a good wind to blow some of those sparks over, right?
Yes, yes. That is a huge thing nowadays, fire patterns, and they are wind driven. So
I was supposed to go to Australia earlier this year, but with the fires that were there, I had to postpone my trip. And of course, then COVID hit, so I'm not going anywhere.
I'm jealous. I want to go to Australia.
Now, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If you were going to be a spokesperson for the fire department and talking to all the girls out there, what words of encouragement would you say to them?
Be a hard worker. It doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, how little you are. Just be a hard worker and be smart. I've definitely followed the motto, work smarter, not harder. There's always a couple of ways to skin a cat, for lack of terms, but as long as you are a hard worker and willing to get a little sweaty and dirty, anybody can do it.
Okay, good. Well, Nicole, I appreciate you coming on today and chatting with me. I really do, and I wish you the very best, and stay safe.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Bolingbrook, you just heard a lot from one of Bolingbrook's finest in our fire department.